Hello, it's Polly from Scottish Adoption, and today I'm absolutely delighted to have with me Rosalind Powell. She is the author of a book, How I Met My Son, which chronicles her journey into parenthood via adoption. Ros is an author. She is also a journalist. She has written for many publications, interviewed many celebrities around the world for Hello Magazine, for The Guardian, for The Times, for The Observer. Today, however, she is here with us to touch on some of the themes from her book, and crucially, I'm absolutely delighted to welcome alongside her son Levi, who is a main character, as you can imagine, in the book. So thank you so much both for being here.
So I'm just going to start off. It's probably a bit confusing for any of you who've read the book, because in the book, as we left it, Gabriel, who was talked about in the book, was 10. And today we have with us Levi. It is the same person, but as Ros kind of talks about in her book, when she was writing it, she was unsure about a few things. And one of them was, protecting him, protecting his identity. But I'm delighted that he's here with us this morning and he's happy to reveal his real name and talk to us. So I just wondered whether I could just start off by asking you, Levi. I know we were just talking a bit before and you said that you hadn't read the book, but you have had little bits about it. And one of the things that your mum had kind of mentioned in the book was she was very nervous about writing it. And have you two had a conversation about that? How you kind of feel about that?
So even before, even while you were writing the book, actually, you always asked if, even though I was, I may not have understood everything, you still asked along the process, is it okay? Is this okay? And even when you're in the kind of process of having it published and everything, and you always kind of made it very clear that if I ever if I ever said that at any point I felt uncomfortable with it, you'd just stop. I think you even interviewed me as well for it at one point. So there were lots of kind of different things where I all had kind of a choice and a say in it. So I felt, and I still feel now that was kind of it's a very big kind of important thing. And the fact that you did ask, and I was always okay with it. But it was much, I don't know, I think maybe it made it easier for you that
you said yes,
that I was saying yes all along the way.
It's really nice to hear that, but probably for you, Rose, that is a bit of a relief as well, because one of the things that really came through strongly while you were writing the book is kind of the sense of responsibility you felt, and I guess getting the balance between writing something that you hoped other people would find useful and also protecting your son. And, when you reflect back on that now, how do you feel?
It's funny because I felt I didn't have a choice but to ask him how he thought about it. But by the same token, I recognised that he was only sort of 9, 10. So what's he going to say? No, I object. How very dare you? So it sort of, it still potentially could have been quite exploitative, I guess, because although I'm having that conversation, he's not really, mature enough, old enough to understand the sort of full connotation of it. And it's something I really, really wrestled with. So when I'd wrote it over several years, sort of picked it up and put it down, picked it up and put it down. And when I was finally sort of finishing it, I did have a real major panic thinking, what am I doing? I should not be doing this. Should not be exposing us all in this way. I shouldn't be exposing Levi. And I had to sort of be talked down by, various people like my family and my agent and publisher, and they were all, so it was definitely a source of anxiety, but I'm really pleased I pushed through.
Certainly for me, reading it was, I've said before, it was so illuminating. It was really wonderful. I think there's not that many accounts out there always of people who are kind of prepared to talk about some of the stuff that, during that really long process of adoption, you don't maybe have the space to talk about, or you're nervous about talking about, but also thinking about the future. And one of the things that really struck me that came across was about, what will the future look like and how will it be? And I guess we left the book when you were 10, Levi. So I just wondered if you'd be happy to talk a bit about the two of you, kind of your adoption journey and how it's felt at different stages for you, and fill us in a bit on the gaps.
Well, I mean, I think the thing that's kind of always played a big part in the entire process, and when you're, writing the book and everything, is how open we all are about it. Like, we're always kind of, you never kind of pressure me to talk about anything, but the option is always there. And you've always, I think I went through a phase maybe a couple of years ago where I asked more questions about it. But yeah, no, it's we've always kind of had that thing of I could go and ask any question, and you always kind of made it clear that you wouldn't be offended about anything. So I think, yeah, and as I've got older as well, that's kind of, I think that's played a very big part about it. So yeah, I think there's a lot of just the openness and honesty about it all has kind of, it's really helped, throughout everything that I can remember.
It's always been a space to talk kind of thing.
Yeah, exactly. I've never felt like I couldn't, like if I didn't feel like I could talk about something, it was never because I didn't feel like I could. It was because I didn't feel comfortable talking about it myself. So yeah.
I think from my point of view, it's very much down to Levi and the person he is. We always say it, me and his dad always say it, but we did luck out with him most definitely, in that he's I know all parents say this about their children, but he is a pretty special person. And I think all the things that I was dreading and fearing, like, he wasn't a perfect teenager, but we didn't have the sort of, we didn't have we didn't have what I was anticipating, which was the whole sort of rejection. You're not my mum, you're not my dad, I hate you, I'm off, that, which is what I was fully geared up for, actually, and that hasn't happened yet. So we didn't have to deal with that, which I know lots of people do, and we haven't. So that's, that I think that's a testament to Levi, really, in that. There's part of me that, and Levi will, back me up on this. I'm always trying to get him to talk about it. Yeah. I'm always trying to get him to discuss it. And
the journalist.
Yeah, and maybe, and Levi chooses not to, and that's completely his prerogative. And I think that I anticipate that will change one day.
And
probably will.
When you think about, you're always trying to talk to him, do you think that some of that is going back to that kind of really intense preparation that you had about, you write quite a lot in the book about all the kind of things you have to learn, and how, a lot of people in the adoption community, we sometimes take it for granted that everyone understands the adoption processes, what it means to be adopted. But I think as soon as you're outside of that, people do ask, what we would kind of think were kind of slightly mad questions. And, do you think some of that worry about checking that he feels okay to ask is because of how other people around you have maybe wondered about adoption, or how maybe some of your views were before you knew a bit more about it?
Maybe. I think it's my nature more than anything. I think, I do like to sort of discuss and examine and explore and analyze and all of that. And I'm sort of an open person myself emotionally. So I expect other people to be the same as me, and they're not. And Levi isn't. Levi deals with things in a very, very different way to me, which I do appreciate more now as he gets older, and I have to respect that. What was interesting, actually, Levi, and we did talk about this, a couple of months ago I came across his later life letter, which was written by his social worker, which we were given along with all the other stuff when he first came to us. So, when he was 2, basically, I'm giving this letter by the social worker and said, give this to him when he's older. And I sort of forgot about it. And I'd sort of put it in amongst a whole load of other papers. And I just sort of came across it the other day, and I thought, blimey, I've got this piece of information which I haven't given Levi, and then felt awful, and then sort of read it and thought, I really don't think there's anything in here that I haven't told him. But there's always that fear.
Panic. Absolutely.
Yeah, there's always that fear. And I felt like I'd really, I'd done a bad thing. And then I
Yeah.
I did give it to you, and I sort of outlined. I said, "Well, look, this is the gist of it."
I mean, the first thing you said was, as well as like, you know, you through all this, you said that there was nothing in there that you hadn't told me already.
Yeah.
I haven't read it.
But you haven't read
Okay,
it.
because I was going to ask, because sometimes that's an interesting thing, right? Because you feel like you've told someone something, but actually the way they remember it is slightly different.
Exactly.
And, you know, and that can be one of the things that come up, that people think, you've kept stuff from me. But so I'm not going to ask that, Levi, because you've not read it.
But there's the, because there was that, and there's also but this I've had for ages, with the letter from my birth mum anyway, which I also haven't read. I don't know, I think the reason for it as well is I don't associate myself.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
It's more, I don't know, I don't feel any kind of disconnect from the family to a point where I feel like I want to read it right now.
Mm-hmm.
So it's, so I don't know, because I've gone to read it before and then I just stopped myself. So
it's interesting that you say disconnect, though. It's interesting that you say you don't feel any disconnect from the family, that you feel because you don't have to feel disconnected to us.
Yeah,
to read it. You know what I mean?
No, I know, but I think it's more where at this stage in life.
Yeah.
I don't feel like it would benefit anything if I read it now.
Yeah. And I guess
if that makes sense.
I think probably what you're saying is something that, you know, certainly we would hear quite a lot. You know, when is a good time? Is there a good time? You know, one of the things that happens at Scottish Adoption is we keep a lot of adoption records, and we have people come see us in their 80s and 90s. You know, that's when they've decided it's a good time.
That's amazing.
And I guess it's that recognition that, you know, for some people, adoption really does feel like a lifelong journey, and there's certain times. But what's really, I think, lovely hearing from both of you today is there's a space. You know, one of the things I think can be really complicated is that idea of loyalty. But, you know, you're in a situation, you know, I can feel and I can see you, Ros, saying, but you can, you know, it's not a choosing thing. You're not trying to choose. But, you know, actually it is a real journey. For a lot of people, and some people never choose to go and look at that information, and some people, you know, the moment it's 16 in Scotland that you can access their records, are like, give me them now. You know, it's a real spectrum. I think that probably touches a bit on back to just us all being individuals, and what works for some people just isn't the same for others.
I can understand it from the point of view that Levi's so, you know, connected. We're all so connected, you know what I mean? Not just to me and his dad, but to, you know, grandparents and cousins,
extended family,
aunties, and, you know, all of that, and so much part, you know, that I guess the thought, I mean, I'm speaking for you, so correct me if I'm wrong, but I like the thought of another family being out there, or not, you know, another birth family must feel like, well, they've got nothing to do with me.
Yeah, and I think we've had this we've had this kind of discussion at different times in life anyway. But I guess the key thing in my brain is that they didn't raise me. Do you know what I mean? Like, it's, you know, everything in pretty much everything in my life for the past 18 years has all been you and this family and everything, and you know, and it's all, that's, you know, and that's where all my emotion is. So I think that's why, I don't know, I think that's why there is that thing of, I don't really think about it, because they haven't had anything to do with, you know, who I am now, the kind of person that I am now. And there are times when I guess I do actually forget that I'm adopted, because I don't feel, I don't know if there is a feeling, but I don't feel it if there is. I don't feel, you know, I don't wake up and I go, oh, I'm adopted, sort of thing. Do you know what I mean? And I think the only times I've really thought about it is when it's like at school and stuff, when people have seen me with you and dad and everything. Yeah. And then they ask questions about it. But even then I just kind of went, oh, I'm adopted. Like it was, you know, like it wasn't a big thing. And then everyone...
When you say that, Levi, when you say people at school see you with mum and dad, what do you mean?
So like on like parents' evenings and stuff.
Yeah.
And the fact that, you know, to do with, I think everyone just kind of got confused because of skin tone and everything. And the fact that I don't look like either of you two.
Should we say what your ethnicities?
Yeah.
Go on.
Well, I don't know. Well, I guess on forms I put mixed Caribbean or something.
But you've been
which
brought
is
up
the
in a
option.
family of 2 white British
Yes,
parents.
exactly.
Yeah.
So there is, so there has always been that from other people, and I haven't seen it as a big thing saying that, and then everyone starts like asking questions, but everyone always like prefaces the question with, "I don't want to offend you, but," and I'm just there like, I don't mind if people. I've never been, because we've been so open about it. Whenever other people have asked, whenever other people have asked, I've had no problem really talking to other people about it. I do think that is a big thing of the fact that we've always been open about it. So I've never felt that it was a negative thing.
Yeah.
So when people ask me, I'm very happy to just kind of talk about it and answer anything.
Yeah. And I guess there's different stages, right? Because I'm assuming when you're little, and at school, I think about children who are kind of 5, 6, 7, that kind of age.
Yeah.
Children are quite matter of fact, and often that can be the time when they say, you look different from your mum. Why? You might say, because I'm adopted, and they're like, okay. Sometimes actually the questions come, don't they, as you get a bit older, and then people are maybe asking things that aren't as straightforward to answer, or you don't really want to answer, or it feels a bit private. And did you kind of feel that change as maybe if people asked you stuff when you're a teenager, or?
Yeah. I think as I got older, especially around being a teenager, I think people would ask stuff like, do you want to go and find your birth family?
Which is such a private question.
It's a private question, but to me it doesn't seem like one unless I think about it.
Okay.
And my answer then has always kind of been, has always just been no. Because as I've said before, they haven't had, I think it was, I don't know, maybe it's when I was a bit younger, being a teenager and everything anyway. But I was just there very kind of dismissive and just like, no, I don't know who they are, sort of thing. I think I think about it more now. I don't think my answer's changed, but I think as I get older, I'll probably be more open to it. I think the way I think is very much like I've got all this base foundation, strong root and everything. And then I could go out and find people from my birth family, whatever.
It would be on your terms, I guess.
Exactly. It's all it's all my choice, Maybe I will, maybe I won't. But there is always that.
Yeah.
I wondered, sorry, Polly. In terms of you growing up a different skin tone to us. So, that there had not been issues with that, but you are aware of the fact that you're the only person of colour in our family.
It's more when we have like family gatherings or stuff. Like at Christmas and stuff like that. I never really notice it or think about it when we're just at home. Yeah. Because it's just, it's us in the house and even with, around grandparents and stuff, I never really think about it. It's when you start bringing in, everyone else, like, for example, when we've been at weddings or something, and I look around and it's very strange to kind of, it's not strange, but I notice it it's very obvious to me, which isn't really, I've never really seen it as an issue, but it's just there. It's something that like I can see and address.
Yeah, it's not something, I guess the thing about it in some ways is your identity is available for other people to notice in some ways, isn't it? In a way that maybe if you were white British, it might not be as obvious.
And that's something that's crossed my mind before, but I've never, but I think there is a difference between thinking about it and worrying about it. But
yeah, and I think we were talking briefly before, and you were saying you've kind of not really got into that, read much on the kind of social media stuff that out there, but there can be quite a lot of controversy. There's kind of a movement around kind of transracial adoption, and I guess you're just recognizing that that's not something that you've been particularly involved with. And I guess I just wanted to acknowledge that, we're aware that some people have very strong views, but for you, it's not something that you've particularly engaged in. And actually, your focus has been kind of family life. And I know you're at university now, and
exactly.
Yeah, you've kind of had other areas of focus, really.
Yeah, exactly.
And what about you, Ros? Because I know it's something that you write about being worried about and doing all this research on, and getting conflicting views and trying to understand what the right thing to do is. And, how have your views about that over time changed or remained the same?
It's changed as Levi's sense of his own identity has become stronger, I guess. So I suppose at the beginning, when we were going through it all, we were told very much that, we'd have to reflect his cultural identity and all of that, which always sort of confused us slightly, because we just thought, well, we're not quite sure what that is. And also because there was some question mark over where Levi's ethnicity is from anyway. I mean, we know that one of his grandfathers was from the Caribbean, but we're not entirely sure which island. We think it might be Jamaica, but we're not sure. So there was that. And I guess we live in London, so there's we're in a very sort of multicultural area anyway. So maybe we could have done more. I don't know. I'm aware that
I don't think so, but
it's I mean, in terms of our friendship group, I mean, it is predominantly white. I mean, my best friend is mixed ethnicity, but that's about it. But it's as Levi's got older and I suppose identified more as being, well, you call yourself mixed race, don't you?
Yeah,
you call
I say
mixed race,
rather
than mixed heritage. But as he identifies as a mixed race person, that's been interesting, because he has had experiences that we haven't had. I mean, he has been stopped by the police, and if either me or his dad were mixed race, then we would have had that conversation possibly and warned him that might happen, which I know does happen in other, in black families where, the parents do sit down with the kids and say, look, the chances are you're going to be stopped. This is what you say. And we didn't do that with him. And so he has had experiences that we haven't had, and he is going to be viewed by some people in a different way that we are. So I find that's been really educational for me and really enlightening. And I sort of,
I think the thing is as well, is that I've also had the opportunity in life to make friends with people, who are also of colour, I guess. So even if maybe we hadn't had those conversations when I was younger, I still have, people who sort of understand that and have been stopped themselves and stuff. And it, so even I don't necessarily feel like I missed it with you, because, and it's something which I've kind of been aware of anyway. It's kind of on social media, it's kind of put out there in the news, stuff like that. So it's always something which I've been aware of. And then, if it happens to stuff, I have that friendship group I can go and kind of talk to about it, who will understand it as well. And I think if I didn't have the friendship group, it'd be a bit more difficult. Yeah,
we're not in a little village in
exactly.
nowhere, but you're the only person of colour in the village.
Yeah, exactly.
Which probably would be a different experience. Wouldn't it?
Yeah.
I think, it really would, because then, I think that's the thing. It's like, even I think the reason I don't notice it here and I only notice it in family gatherings and stuff is because the second I walk out the door, there's all sorts of stuff. There's all sorts of different cultures and races and everything.
Families are different now anyway, aren't they? I mean, they're just even in the time that we've been together as a family, I mean, families have really evolved. You do get all sorts of different shapes and sizes. So
yeah, definitely.
And I think
I don't agree with that. I mean, I'm going to go out on a limb now. I mean, this whole thing about white couples not being able to adopt people of colour, I just think, don't agree with it.
And I guess, you're talking from a place of having had a very positive experience. And And yeah, I think it's so complex, isn't it? Because I think it's about recognizing that, for you guys, like you're saying, you live in a vibrant, multicultural area. You've thought very carefully about these things. You're acknowledging that there's different. And I think some of the stuff that has been more complicated, probably historically, to be honest, is when people are living in an area that is not diverse and it's not being mentioned, and there's a kind of sense, there's some there's been some quite powerful documentaries and stuff where someone will say something like, well, we never saw colour, and the young person saying, but I am of colour, like that wasn't actually helpful for us, so.
Yeah, no, colour blindness can be as racist as anything else.
Exactly.
I was at a conference not so long ago actually about transracial adoption, and there were a couple of speakers who called themselves TRAs, i.e. transracial adoptees, and they were talking about having grown up in a family of white privilege and how difficult it is to come from a family of white privilege and then going out into the world where you're not seen as privileged. And I remember saying that to you, Levi, and you were sort of, I don't know, you poo-pooed it.
Yeah, I didn't agree with the term transracial adoptee because, and I don't know, and from what I've read as well, and I kind of see it, I don't agree with the fact that there's people who are adopted who are then defining themselves as a different type of adopted to other people.
Sure.
Like I've never, and I will never in my life say that I'm a transracial adoptee, because I don't know, I don't feel like having that, an extra layer of just separating things is helpful or good, because everyone will have a different experience with it. And I'm not dismissing the fact that there are people who have had difficult experiences with it. That will always happen. But I don't know, I just think, me personally, I think that if you just had groups of people who did have a tough time all round, coming together in it and everything, I think there'd be less of this kind of negativity about it.
Sure.
And obviously I can't speak for people who think and feel differently to me, but that's just my view on it.
I guess it's that acknowledgement, isn't it, that sometimes there is a movement that speaks for a whole group of people, and it's finding the space to say, well, I don't mind that you say that, but actually I don't feel like I quite fit into that movement, and I would find it actually offensive if you put me alongside that movement, because it's more complicated than that for me. I see it from a slightly
exactly
point of view. Absolutely. And so just thinking again a bit more about kind of the last few years and the journey you've kind of gone on together, often in adoption, what people do get very worried about, and I know you mentioned before, was that you were one of those people that was feeling very angsty about how the teenage years would be. And I just wondered if you would be happy to give us a little bit of insight into how they were for you guys.
Yeah.
Should I go first?
Yeah, if you want to.
He might disagree with me. Early teens, I mean, I was expecting things to kick off around about sort of 13, 14, and it didn't actually. I'd say I found it more difficult around the sort of 18, 19 mark, actually. But that was because Levi's always been really good, actually. I mean, I know you're 20. I know you're 20.
Yeah.
But he's a good boy. You know what I mean? He was a good boy.
Yeah,
he was a good little boy, and he was a good teenager. He never did anything to really worry us or concern us. You know, I mean, in terms of alcohol and drugs, we never had an issue. He wasn't going out all night, but not coming home. We didn't have any of that concern. I mean, whether he was doing all that on the sly, we didn't know. But what I mean is we did
it really well.
we didn't have to put up with any of that stuff at all. What I struggled with is, and you can still get like this to a degree, you can get grumpy and moody and uncommunicative, and so that, and so I would just be grunted at. There were times where there was a complete close down in communication. I think that got worse over lockdown, because I think
Yeah.
you did really struggle, like a lot of kids did.
100%.
I mean, the first lockdown was manageable in that it was all a bit sort of new. So our cat's just
Yeah.
but then, halfway through and towards the end, it was really difficult. And I think you were desperately unhappy.
Yeah,
And the way that came
Yeah.
across to his dad and I was that he just didn't bother talking to us. And we were, I felt like I was just this irritating person that was around. He was very dismissive and not terribly polite. And I sort of
And that
felt quite
hard.
resentful about that. And then he moved out.
Yeah. Well, I think
Then
I think the problem I think in the first lockdown especially, I just kind of went into a mode of I got to the point where I just felt like I was just passing time as much as possible.
Yeah.
Like I would just spend hours in my room on my computer. I think.
You would have rows about that, actually.
Yeah.
That's the one thing we did row about was gaming.
Is that I just went into a thing of I'd play on my computer for like 8 hours a day or something, and then I'd play into the night as well, just because I felt like I had nothing else.
Yeah.
Because that before it was my thing of I'd be I'd have my social life, I'd go to school, I'd hang out with mates, I'd come home, I'd play for a couple of hours, have dinner, and then go to bed. That was kind of my thing. But I think when lockdown hit, it just became, I don't know, I think even though I was in the house all the time, I just became very distant. I didn't feel it so much at the time. Like if I look back now, it's very obvious. And I think, I don't know, I think it just wasn't really a good healthy time for anyone. But
It's that hindsight thing as well, isn't it? Because, Ros, you were just saying like you were feeling a tiny bit resentful, but actually when you started talking about it, you were kind of saying, I could see he was really unhappy. And Levi, again, you kind of saying, looking back, it seems quite obvious, but it's in the moment, isn't it? It's really hard
really
to
difficult.
kind of separate it out. And, I think that probably is one of the things with parenting. It's quite interesting. It's reminding me actually of when you talk in your book, Ros, about when Levi was a toddler. And there's a few times when you kind of talk about having these long, exhausting days. And actually, it was almost writing the book that you look back and think, wow, yeah, that was really hard work. And I was finding it difficult. But in the thick of it, you're just kind of overwhelmed by it all. And it's the same. It's almost the same thing there. Yeah.
Well, I think it was just that I didn't think he liked me at all. And it's really hard living with someone who you think doesn't like you. And so I was hurt, but at the same time, I was a bit resentful as well, because I just thought, really? Am I that bad? Have I done, here I am cooking your dinners and, keeping you fed, watered, the usual parental, moan about, ungrateful teenagers. But that's really how I felt. And at one point I just thought, I've lost him. He's gone. I've lost him.
I guess
well, you brought up the thing of me, when I had my first year of uni, it was post-lockdown, but we were still 80% online.
It's just not the experience you maybe were hoping for.
And I think for me personally, that was very weird. Because we'd had all this lockdown time, and then my brain was very much kind of going, right, when I start uni, I'll be active, everything will be fine. And obviously it wasn't as much, at least not at the beginning. Towards the end, we started going back and everything, and it was fine. But I think I was still in a very stressed and fatigued mindset, and I think that was probably because when I get stressed and tired anyway, it's
don't talk.
I don't. I very much close off.
Which is something I've come to learn about. And I have to learn to back off in a way, because I'm what's the matter? What's going on? And I think I just need to get on with it, really.
Because the thing is, when I'm it's not against anyone or anything. When I'm like that, it's just if when I am like that, the second that I start having to properly start thinking about stuff or other stuff, then have a full-on proper conversation, I just kind of shut down. Which and it's which isn't necessarily great, but I can't always help that. But it's never been a thing against you or dad or anything. I think, yeah, as you said, those specific times around those ages was also difficult just in life anyway.
I just wonder as well, Ros, you were saying you worried, he doesn't even like me, I'm losing him, all that stuff. Like, do you think that does tap back into some of those, maybe I think some of those kind of deep-rooted fears that come from adoption?
Yes, I think it probably does. I think it probably does, the fact that I even think I could lose him, but, well, no, actually, I mean, birth parents can lose touch with their birth children, but I'm sure there are I'm sure there are probably deep-rooted insecurities there around that whole thing about connection. And
I just really noticed when you wrote, I think quite early on in the book, you said something like, my two biggest fears as a prospective adopter are, will he love me? And will I love him? You kind of said. And I thought, oh wow, because as someone who works in adoption, I don't think they were necessarily the two big fears that would kind of pop into my mind. And it was really striking. And I thought, gosh, absolutely, of course they are. Like, of course they are. And I guess there may be, it sounds like every now and then there's kind of a tiny bit buried under the surface. Do they pop back up? And I think all parents probably, however you've kind of parented a child, you have those worries about losing their children, and but I just wonder if they are maybe a little bit
I mean, there might be a bit of residue fear of rejection. I mean, but maybe you have it as well, I don't know, but I mean, there probably is that I'm sure there is. I'm going off on a bit of a sidetrack here, but when you're talking about the toddler years, and how difficult and exhausting they were, and one thing I feel a really overriding sense with, and again, might be something that birth parents feel, but maybe not to the same degree, is that I wish I'd been more in the moment. I wish I'd appreciated it more. I wish I'd worried less. I wish I'd just. I was so worried a lot of the time, I mean, and it's different layers of worrying, because you worry as a parent anyway, looking after a toddler, but when it's a toddler that you don't know, you're just getting to know, you literally don't know this little person, they're a complete and utter stranger. And just thinking, am I doing the right? And why are they doing that? Is that normal? Should he be doing that? But and having to talk to other people about it.
I
just wish I'd savoured it more, because I see little kids now, little toddlers, and I just think, oh, they're so gorgeous,
cute.
They're so cute. And I know I did. I know, of course, I knew that you were cute. Of course, I knew.
And I mean, it comes like it sings through the book,
but I just was worried the whole time.
But I think it's that I'm so glad you kind of talked about that, because I think that is something really interesting. And certainly, I'm just thinking about some of the research I've done, and in that, one of the big themes that came through was this idea of being kind of like a super parent. So it's not even just that you're worried about, am I getting everything right? Which I think is part of the parenting role, am I getting everything right? But I do worry whether, sometimes adoptive parents hold themselves to a slightly higher account.
Absolutely.
There's kind of an added responsibility there, but also you've kind of gone through this really rigorous process where everyone's been telling you need to do this, and you kind of said, okay, I will. And whether in those early stages particularly, there's an extra pressure, and that comes through.
Well, I mean, it's multi-layered, isn't it? Because I think, like I said, you haven't gone through the whole gestation, you haven't gone through the pregnancy, the birth, and the not in all cases, but that sort of immediate biological bond that happens when someone gives birth. So you haven't had that. There's the long, arduous journey you've gone through to get to this point anyway, to have the child. You don't know this child. They're, as I said, they're a stranger. You're a stranger to them. They're a stranger to you. Also, obviously in adoption, a lot of these kids will have had sort of traumatic backgrounds. So, there will be other issues that you have to worry about. I mean, in our case, that wasn't the case. But even if Levi hadn't had, he didn't have this awful, disruptive, neglectful or abusive background. However, he's still an adopted child. He's still been, had this huge
Well, he's not. You've not had consistency.
He's not had
well.
consistency. So there are huge emotional issues that you have to take on board. So yeah, it is parenting with knobs on. It is, but by the same token, it's really difficult because you're on high alert. You're looking. The thing in my head always when he was little is that because he's adopted, or is it because he's a mad 3-year-old, and it's trying to balance the two.
Yeah.
And also when Gary and I adopted, I don't think the whole idea of therapeutic parenting was as prevalent as it is now. And I don't know an awful lot about therapeutic parenting, actually. Maybe it would have been helpful for me to have known more. I don't know. But it wasn't ever something I particularly engaged in. As far as I know, therapeutic parenting is, it's a lot to do with discipline, isn't it?
I guess a really classic thing we would probably say to our, so this is like a very basic level, but we would kind of say to our prospective adopters is, for example, when you've got a little one who's kind of highly dysregulated, not listening, doing all the thing, in a situation where you might have been growing up and someone had said, right, that's it, time out, go on the naughty step, or go and you can go up to your bedroom, we would say never have time out, always have time in. So maybe you're stopping that activity or whatever's going on, but the kind of intervention would be alongside each other. So you would kind of sit next to each other, something like that. So it'd be something very much about, you wouldn't want to do anything that was really rejecting, just because there's a recognition that, all these things can be triggering. They, and about, you don't know what we don't want is a little child who doesn't know that this is where they're going to be and has this kind of fear of abandonment. And of course, sometimes that just will stay with you because of the journey you've come on, or your personality type, or whatever it is. But I guess there's a kind of sense around, of course, you need boundaries and you need routines and you need all these other things to come into play, but they have to be done. We would really encourage them to be kind of done in a therapeutic way, which is very difficult.
Which we didn't do.
Yeah.
We didn't do that, I don't think. I think we used methods that our friends were using with their kids.
Yeah.
Except I never had naughty step or anything.
No, you didn't have a naughty step.
I always made fun of my cousins for having one, though.
No, you didn't have a naughty step, but I might have sent you to your room.
Yeah.
I would have sent you to your room. I would have raised my voice.
Yeah.
Certainly would have raised my voice. One thing I do really regret, actually, is that when Levi first came, for the first... probably for the good first 6 months, you did have sort of sleep disruption. So you'd wake up at some sort of ridiculous... You'd wake up at 4 or 5 o'clock in the morning,
right,
and we'd have to get up with you. And then you went through a phase where you really had problems getting to sleep, and it would take you ages and ages and ages. And I was a bit like... Sergeant Major with that. I just remember being quite like, no, you're going to bed at this time. And, I'd do the whole sort of like, let him cry, and go in and I think I kept a logbook. I woke up at this time and then it took this long to get him. And I got a bit obsessed about it. And I was probably doing everything wrong. If I was doing it now, there'd probably be, and like we never let you sleep in our bed.
Did you not?
Not really, because I don't think you would have wanted to, actually, thinking about it. You weren't that
I don't remember. That's the thing. It's weird, though, isn't it? Obviously, I don't have memory of it.
Because you loved your cot, actually. You really loved your cot. But we didn't even do that because it's like, no, we've got to set... we've got to do this the right way, and so we're probably sort of 1960s parenting.
But like you say, you kind of some of it is about who's around you, right? It's about who you're talking to, who's kind of giving you advice, and if your friends have got, because I do think that's one of the things that's most difficult for some of our adoptive families. We'll give them advice that we say your family and friends are going to roll your eyes when you do this because they won't get it, and actually. It is really difficult because what what else do you go off other than the people around you and seeing what works for them, and advice changes. What we're talking about now, maybe in 10 years time we'll say, some parts of that are really great, and some parts of that actually maybe don't do it that way, try this. So
I would do it differently. I mean, I think I would, if we were doing it now, then there's I wish I had used more therapeutic parenting with you. I do wish I had.
Yeah, because I that's the thing. I don't know, because I don't remember. I don't know what it was like, so I don't know if it has.
So you'd say you
effect.
had a happy childhood if you were.
Yeah, if someone actually asked me, I'd be like, yeah, I had a happy childhood, of course, like without any kind of question.
You wouldn't have to
or
think
doubt.
twice. Yeah.
No, because all the memories I have are all kind of, well, not all, every single one. Like, there will obviously be things in there, but like as an overall thing, I'd had a good happy childhood. So I don't know. I don't know if it had any negative effect or not, or if it did the opposite and had a positive effect. I don't know.
But you can't do things you didn't know about at the time. Like, that's the reality, isn't
exactly.
it?
True.
It's a bit like some of the other things that we've kind of learned over time about adoption. The reason you've been so open and it's been really important, you will have been told it's so important to be kind of really open about adoption, is because we know there were loads and loads of adoptions that happened kind of in the 60s and 70s, and people weren't open about them, and it has caused real difficulties for that some of that group of people. So you can't be critical of those parents because they didn't know any differently. And I think it's about it's good to kind of take on advice if it's there. But trends change over time as well. Looking back then, when you kind of you say you're looking back and you kind of wish you'd maybe like savored those toddler moments a bit different, and is there anything else that you kind of look back on and you think, I think I maybe feel a little bit differently, that was maybe I overthought that, or I found that hard, and do you have any advice that you'd offer? But I think both of you really, to any prospective adopters.
I think I overthought everything, but then that's my nature to overthink.
But I was going to say, you do tend to overthink a lot of things, even when you're doing things like the right way or something.
I mean, it's just. I think we are so, as parents, again, generally we're so. We're juggling so many things, grappling with so many things. It's difficult sometimes to sit back and just sort of smell the coffee and enjoy the moment. So I think I wish I'd done that, because it's an old cliche, but time goes so quickly. I mean, I can't believe I'm sitting next to him and he's 20.
Yeah.
I mean, the last 18 years have just gone by ridiculously quickly. And I wish I had savoured it more. And I think everyone's doing their best. We're all doing our best. If you've got to this stage where you're adopting a child, I mean, Christ, you've gone through the ringer. You know what I mean? You've had to prove yourself over and over and over and over again. You're taking a huge risk. Yeah. And I don't think adopters do get the praise they deserve a lot of the time, because I think, when you're going through the adoption process, it's all about the child, which is exactly how it should be. The child has to come through it first, and it's about the child's needs. But I think that people who are out there doing it and putting themselves in that position, they're fantastic. I really, they are. They're really strong, brave, brilliant people. And I think sometimes people just need to give themselves more credit for that, actually.
Be kinder to themselves, really.
Be kinder to yourselves. And if you've got this part far and you've been passed by the panel and everything else, then it means that you're good enough. You are good enough. And I think sometimes that's all you have to be is good enough. And you're not superhuman. You're not going to solve anybody's problems. You're not going to cure anybody of anything, but you've got this far. You've done really well. You can only do your best, and that's
I think that's really good advice, and really nice to hear, because I think it is a really difficult process, and I think a lot of our families do worry about, are they doing enough, are they doing it right, and yeah, and it is very, like you say, it is very child centric, and it should be very child centric. But sometimes, while you're focusing on that, you forget that there's some adults there having a bit of a tough time too.
Yeah,
it's important to acknowledge that.
And they're in a really vulnerable, a lot of them are in a really vulnerable position. You don't know what, they've been through sort of hardship and disappointment and loss probably themselves. And, and I think that just needs to be remembered.
Absolutely. What about you, Levi? Do you have
a lot of what you've said I agree with, actually. That whole, also the thing of just kind of remembering is that I think a lot of parents have hard times and struggle anyway. I think the thing to always remember as well is to just always kind of stay positive in it, because as someone who has, very different, but as someone who is like worried about just anything in life, it's always worse the more you worry about it, because then you start you start imagining things. Just kind of savor the moments and just know that you're doing your best. Because and I think the thing is as well is that there's I don't think there's a right way to parent. I think there's many different methods that work differently anyway. And I've seen my mates and their parents, and I just kind of, and there are times like as a child you kind of go, oh, I wish my parents were like that. But I don't have that ever since I think maybe 14 onwards or something, or like as I started to kind of at least mature a bit more in the way I think. I don't have that. I never really have that thing of I wish I'd been parented differently or something. Because especially where I am now as well, if everything you've done in the past has kind of led up to this point, then you've clearly done something right. So I think just have more have the confidence in yourself that you're doing the right thing. That's probably what I'd say to people.
It sounds, I know I might sound a bit sort of not glib, but I know it's easy. What I mean is that it's easy for me to sit here and say all this because here's Levi and look at him, he's fantastic. So, and I know people have terrible struggles, and they have far greater problems to deal with than we have. I mean, we have really had it relatively easy, and I put my hand up and say that, full disclosure, we really haven't had to battle with anything too difficult. But you just do your best, and that is all you can do.
So looking back, kind of some of those big feelings and the big worries that you had in the first instance, when you reflect on how you'd feel as a family, how do you see that now?
I think, and I've often said this, but Levi is the child we were meant to have. I can't imagine having any other child. He is, our son, and the person he is, the way we are as a family, we have just fitted beautifully together. And that's he was meant. We were meant to be. That's so. I don't know if there's fate or destiny or whatever, but
that's how it feels. That's how it feels.
Absolutely. Yeah.
No, it's lovely.
I think also as well, just being honest and open throughout the whole thing.
Yes.
I think that's probably the biggest thing that I could say, because I think that's the only reason why I see it as a positive thing, or maybe not the only reason, but a big part in why I see everything as positive, and I'm always open to talk about it with people and stuff, and answer questions, is because that's how we've always done it. It was never hidden from me. It was never, it was never a thing of I couldn't ask about it. We couldn't talk about it. Like, it was never anything like that. So I think just having that open and honest, relationship around, maybe not about everything, but around the whole adoption thing, but especially specifically around the whole adoption thing. I think if you stay honest and open about that, then it's more likely that they'll see it as a positive thing, and they'll grow up and they won't have a fear of it.
Yeah. I guess it's that kind of, that's kind of come through the whole way, is there's always been an open dialogue at any point if anyone wants one, and, a recognition that you might not always want to have that open dialogue, but it's the space to have it. And that sounds like that's kind of worked for your family, which is great.
Yeah.
I just want to say how much of a pleasure it has been for me today to listen to you both. And I know you were saying, you think you've had it easy and all that kind of stuff, but I think, part of that has just been about your family dynamic and the relationships that, you've built within that, and everybody's story is different. And I guess we're recognizing that, but it's been such a pleasure to hear from you both today. So thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much for having us as well.
Thank you.